Okay, well, oh crap. That's not gonna, maybe it will work. Okay, well, we'll find out. Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and we're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Neel Parekh. He's from Made This Franchise.
Hmm.
And this is a real treat for me. I love to bring franchisors on the show because they have a different way of looking at things than folks who are either agents or franchisees. So let's bring Neel on and we can start the conversation because I know we're going to have a lot of fun today. Hey,
Excited to be
Neel,
here,
how are
Josh.
you?
Very good. Thank you for having me here. Excited to be here.
My pleasure. So, um, you started your business from scratch, you wandered all over the country, and you did this whole
Hmm.
thing remotely. So, oh shit, why didn't you look at my calendar? Um, so, how did you end up deciding that what you were doing was a good idea for a franchise, or was that how you started from day one?
No, I definitely was not even thinking about franchising. So my business is called Made This. It's a residential cleaning company focused on two niches. One residential cleaning, and the other one is vacation rental cleaning, like Airbnbs and vacation rental turnovers. So a little bit coming at the old school cleaning industry in kind of a new age way. You know, we're doing a lot of like online marketing, making things very easy. It's someone's called it the franchise for millennials, right? And it's that type of business model which is focused on that crowd who just doesn't want to pick up a phone, wants to book online, wants convenience. That's the pitch and the shtick. So now I actually started it just because I just wanted some sort of side hustle. I was working in finance and private equity, and I wanted to quit and travel. And I thought, I tried a bunch of things. Came across a post online of a guy who started a cleaning company. I thought, hey, this is could be a good way to make some cash, and just kind of got going that way. And I didn't really expect much of it. And then, a couple years down the line, which we'll talk about, it started to really, really grow. And eventually in 2018, 2019, I was trying to figure out what would be the next phase of growth. I originally started the company in 2013. And that's when I was exploring how to expand and different ways of expansion. I came across the concept of the franchise model and decided to take that route instead of the other routes.
So it sounds like most franchises have areas that they focus in, and it sounds like your type of business, you could work any place in the country or book places any place in the country. Is that correct?
It's essentially correct. Yeah. I feel like there's advantages of being in the location, but just a little bit of my story. I started it in Los Angeles just because I'm from Los Angeles. My job was there. It was easier to do the initial round interviews with cleaners there. But quickly after, I did 2 years part time, and then I took my side hustle full time. I booked a one-way flight to South America, and I thought, look, I'm going to make this work remotely because I want to travel. It's a local company, but let's figure out how to do it remote. And we figured out the systems from then. This is 2015 to make the company completely remote, where the cleaners go from straight from their home to the job site, and that's the way the system is built. So the way it is now, you technically can be anywhere you want. Like I'm currently in Los Angeles. That's because where my family's from. But all I'm doing is looking at a computer screen. A computer screen here versus in Africa is still a computer screen. So in reality, you could kind of be wherever you want as long as you're within the parameters of the business hours, things like that. So it is, I would say, a newer age way of running this older school industry.
Okay, so that's great for running your business, but
Yeah.
how do you keep your franchises or franchisees straight? I mean, are they allowed to step on each other's toes? Is it a free for all out there? Do they get protected areas, or how does it work?
Yeah, they get protected areas. So we give it based off of a certain number of households, and we give pretty large territories, because we want everyone to have room to grow. I know some franchises give small territories and they have their franchisees like buy additional households from them, which sounds like a very convoluted model. For me, I want to grow when our franchises grow, so we give them hunting room, right? Here's one mistake I made early on in the setting up of Made This for myself, which I want to make sure my franchisees don't do. I went after all of Los Angeles. There's 10 million people here. It's massive. Like it takes an hour to get from one side to the other without traffic, right? So going after the whole city was a terrible decision because I'm doing is spreading my marketing dollars very thin. So I knew with my franchisees, I want to give you, first of all, a protected territory that's big enough, but I don't want it to be big enough where it's the same as what I did going after all of one city. So we usually give territories which are maybe 150 to 200,000 households. And the reality is this type of business model is you just need a few hundred, couple hundred recurring customers in order to make a good chunk of money, right? and we give them 150 to 250,000 households to hunt from. So they have protected territories. There's enough room to grow. They don't step on each other's toes. Admittedly, we're an emerging franchise system right now. Like, I don't know what's going to happen if we're like McDonald's and there's one in every other block and how that's going to work. But I feel like that's a problem for another day.
Yeah, you're not likely to ever become McDonald's because it's a
No.
different model, and they have more than one McDonald's per 150,000 households.
Yeah, definitely. And
I
all of
li
them are still profitable. It's wild.
Yeah, I live in a relatively small town. I think there's 8 or 9 of them for about
Jeez.
100,000 people. So that's a little bit less than 100,000 franchise. I
I
mean,
feel like I should
households.
know this. I wonder if there's more McDonald's or Starbucks that exist, at least in the US. Do you have any idea on that one?
I'm not sure, but my guess is Starbucks.
There we go. So that's a good point to mention. Those are two different models. McDonald's went with the franchise model. Starbucks is not a franchise model. They did corporate expansion. So when I was thinking about expanding, Josh, I was thinking, okay, do I want to go with the Starbucks model, open up a bunch of things myself, or McDonald's model, which is franchising? I chose the McDonald's model. I do know a lot of people who chose the Starbucks model, but there's specific reasons I did not want to do that.
Yeah, I actually like the idea of the McDonald's model.
Hmm.
If you have the ability to document and systematize every little piece of your business, because you have to do that if you want to be a franchisor.
Yep.
So
In that
let's
domain.
talk a little bit about that because that's a big deal. And I'm going to bet there are some people listening to our podcast today that have thought in the back of their mind, gee, maybe I should become a franchisor sometime.
Hmm.
Franchise this great idea of a business that I've been running for the last 5 or 6 years. So um, I'm going to bet that you had a challenge to really get yourself in a position where all your systems were tight enough for you to go out into the world and become a franchisor. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would say we were pretty well systemized, not as good as some companies, but probably more than most local companies. And we still were not ready to franchise, right? I think it took probably a year of just kind of back and forth, cleaning up stuff, figuring everything out with the legal documents to actually get ready to go franchise. But when someone's buying a franchise from you, what this is what your promise is. Hey, I have systems documented. I have an easy to access operations manual for you. I have a training program for you, and I have a loose support system set up for you. Beginning, that's just going to be you, right? For anyone listening, if you're like, okay, who's going to do that? That's you. You're the support system for the franchisee. You're probably going to put the ops manual together. So it is a lot of work, but something you should be thinking about. Even if you don't want to franchise, if you ever want to sell your business, you're going to get the highest valuation if you have these things anyways. You need an ops manual for the new owner. You need to systemize your business. You need a training program. Now, you're going to need this for existing business anyways. So the reality is, if you're going to franchise, this kind of just forces you to do that. Now, there's other things you have to do, which you normally wouldn't need to do for the franchise world, like register in each state, all these legal docs, all these regulations of what you have to file every year. That's the kind of extra stuff. But the pure systemization, you're going to have to do it anyways. Uh, Especially if you want to sell this business in the future, it's going to have to happen. So it is, I did it for the purpose of franchising, but in hindsight, I realized, oh, this is hugely helpful for just my existing business as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about when you create it, what I call sale ready company, is step for creating the sustainable business is systematize your business.
Yep.
And from my world, I'd like to get your comment on this. In my world, the reason you want to systematize your business is because you want to have a business where your customers know what to expect, and you want to have a business that your employees and team members know what you expect for excellence from them. And you
Mm,
can't do that without systems.
100% right. From a pure consumer level, that's 1,000% right. And like we talked about, there's even other levels of like why you need systemization from a sale perspective, from a growth perspective. But just from the pure foundational aspect, you need systems just to even be able to support your customers, right? So hugely, hugely valuable.
So, what did your business look like, as far as amount of employees and revenue and that kind of stuff, when you decide to actually go down the road of franchising?
Sure. I think we were in the low seven figures. So probably like 1 to 1.5 million is kind of where we were in revenue, um, before we decided to go franchising. I don't think that's always needed, but for a lot of local service companies, I think this is what I've seen. A lot of franchisees say, "Can I make $1 million in revenue?" Now, I love the quote: "Top line is vanity, bottom line is sanity." Right. So even though you look at the top line, you're like, "Oh, $1 million, it sounds cool," but the reality is it could be a very low margin business. Who cares? But regardless, people want to know they can make $1 million in revenue. So I feel like being able to prove that out, at least for my type of niche, is valuable for the purpose of selling franchisees. So we were around that dollar mark. Employee count, and at least in terms of cleaners, fluctuated quite a bit. I'd probably say between 25 to 40, some part-time, some full-time, it just varies. And ops staff, we probably had around 9 people running ops. And my ops team is around the world, right? So we're across 6 or 7 different countries. So it's a completely remote system. Everyone's everywhere. There's no office space. So that was kind of one thing that's a little bit more attractive about our model as well is there's low overhead. Something like COVID happens, I don't have a lease. I don't have as many fixed costs, which I am worried about. There's a lot more variable costs outside of the labor. So
So when you that's kind of an interesting thing. So are your franchisees also all virtual?
they are, they are. Now I tell them like you can have an office space if you want. No one opts to get an office space, right? Because you don't need it unless you want to get away from the wife and kids, and you're like, all right, I want to go get an office space. You could go ahead and do that. Most people would just work remotely. And I think a lot of their goals are work remotely and then eventually be able to work while traveling if they want to go on an extended vacation. Their business still functions. They could work from wherever they are. So that's a lot of the reasons why people buy into a made this franchise to begin with is that kind of dream, right? I did that for 5 years. I was backpacking around for about 5 years. I came back because of COVID, all working remotely from my laptop. And I think a lot of people would want that. So it's not a requirement, but I think that's why people get into this to begin with.
So how do you make sure that the people you're hiring as cleaners are honest, trustworthy, and all that kind of good stuff? Because
The-
you're not doing personal interviews. I mean, you got to find some way. You're sending them into houses and
yeah.
businesses, and they're going to want to make sure the people coming in their place are honest and trustworthy.
Yeah. It was funny, Josh. I was about to say that's the $1 million question. I feel like the $1 million has got so diluted. We got to say that's a $1 billion question now, right? Ooh, it just doesn't make sense as a $1 million question anymore. Anyways, that's the $1 billion question is how do you get proper labor, right? I think anyone who's in business, especially for local services who might be listening to this, I, especially if you've been in business a while, the issue isn't getting sales, it's the labor. That's going to be the bottleneck for growth no matter what. And that's always it's a funnel that no one's ever truly mastered because it's tough. You're dealing with people. It's very fickle. So the key is having a proper funnel to test the people out. And I'll explain our exact recruiting funnel. We have a pretty awesome job ad, right? It's funny. It hopefully pushes away the people who don't fit our core values and attracts people who do. So a lot of people who call us say, "Hey, your job ad's been really fun, so I want to give you guys a call." Right? Already the right type of person. We'll do an initial phone screening. After that, we'll go straight to a second video interview. After that, we will either send them on a test cleaning or go straight to an onboarding. And this whole time, we're requiring them to go through hoops. For example, email this person to let's set up the next round call, or please call me on this day at this time, right? There's kind of multiple hoops and tests within this process. Then we find them, send them out to a test cleaning with an existing cleaner just to make sure they're actually doing the work and seeing how they are. Then after that, we'll get into a phone onboarding process and actually do a background check and things like that. It's not foolproof, but the goal is just to make a lot of hoops for them to jump through. Josh, one interesting thing is like we used to do in-person group interviews pre-COVID. Like we'd meet at the Starbucks and say, "Hey, we're doing a group interview. Everyone comes over here. You have a 50% show up rate, and you just go that way." What's been kind of nice is since COVID, a lot of people who were not very tech savvy became tech savvy out of necessity. Everyone knows what Zoom is now, right? Even cleaners. Before it'd be like, "Hey, do you have a smartphone or not? Do you know how to use a smartphone or not?" So it's kind of cool because now we could actually fully shift to remote where we don't even need to do a group interview in person because everyone knows what Zoom is, right? So now we could say, let's hop on a Zoom call, and the cleaners who maybe barely know how to use the phone say, I know what Zoom is. Let me hop on a Zoom call. So it's actually made things a lot more streamlined and efficient for us.
So you mentioned something which is near and dear to my heart, which is core values.
Mhm.
So, how did you develop your core values and how do you use them in your company?
So it's a interesting. It's just I feel like it's. I remember when I worked in corporate, people would be like, the company would say, "Hey, here's our core values. We made nice posters. We put on the wall, and it's over there, and like that's it." And then no one even knew what it was. They didn't exemplify them at all. So it is the concept of core values is interesting, but ours is keep it positive, own it, deliver on promises, and kaizen, which is a proverb which means constantly improve. We
Hmm.
developed them by kind of looking at it starts from the leader. So I kind of looked at, hey, what are the things when they don't happen, they just piss me off. Right? People often think like I feel like it's easier to identify that than it is to identify what you value because everyone values trust, everyone values caring, right? Like it's tough. But if you figure out like if someone crosses this line at your company, you get pissed off, what is that? So I kind of broke it down that way. And then how we actually integrate them into the company is, for example, all of our job ads exemplify the core values. We talk about it every quarter for our quarterly reviews with my team members. I grade them based off the core values. If they violated the core values, we'll bring it up, discuss it at the time, and give them another 3 months to kind of fix it before the next review. So it's always top of mind. And if you're trying to decide if you need to hire or fire someone, look at your core values. Do they violate a core value or not? Right. And it's an iterative process. And Josh, I'm curious about what you think about this. We had our first set of core values and kind of figured out, this is not really working. Like this isn't it. So it took us maybe 2, 3 iterations to get through the point where of like, this is us to a core. Like this represents us. But it is an ongoing process, and it's something you got to really integrate into your company. What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on
my
that?
my experience when we did our values, it was a 6 or 7 year process before I finally got to the point where people would actually believe that what I'm
Mm,
saying was a core value. Most of it was my bad behavior, but that's a different story for another
hmm
day. Um, but the truth is, you're doing what you need to do with core values, which is you're using them as a tool and you use them on a daily basis because you talk about it. If you don't talk about your core values day after day after day, in fact, if you're not sick of talking about your core values, nobody's even hearing you in the first place. Does that make sense?
hmm Yeah, 100%. You're attracting the wrong person, right? You're not telling them what you value, then the communication is just unclear.
Yeah. And if they
So,
don't exhibit it, and if you can't test for it during your interview process, there's a good chance you're going to hire people that are a value mismatch. And values mismatches always cause problems in companies, at least in my
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, 100%. That's probably the biggest cause of tension, I would say. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of business owners forget like this is your company. You could hire, do whatever you want. Like you're setting the tone of the company. There's no playbook where it says you must set the tone this way because this is how all corporate companies do it. Like this is your business. Do whatever you want. Meaning you should probably attract people who want to be like who exemplify the same values as you, right? You get it. You get to design this whole thing, which is the coolest part of being a business owner. Pick your core values because this is you. Your company in some aspect can be an extension of you. Why not really push the values? So I agree. I think it's probably one of the most critical factors.
Yeah, the other thing, I'm going to bet that you have a pretty good recurring revenue stream that happens once you get a house. I'm assuming people want you to keep coming back week after week.
Yep, that's what I like about the cleaning business model, especially for Airbnbs and vacation rentals. It's not a nice to have; it's a need to have. You need a cleaning after someone checks out before the next guest checks in, right?
Hmm.
It's not up for debate. So there's very good recurring revenue built into the model.
So, do you have you contacted Airbnb to see if you can do a joint venture of some sort now that you're a franchise and assumably you have national, maybe international coverage?
I've not contacted them yet because I actually want to get to more locations, but I feel we're the first and only short-term rental focused franchise that exists for cleaning. There's no other one. There's Molly Maid and like a lot of companies who maybe would do it on the side, but that's not really their focus. So we're actually the only ones that exist, but I want to get to proper like kind of critical mass instead of a handful of locations. So that way we could actually go out to them and say, hey, we're service these 50, 100 locations. Let's start partnering now. So that's ideally in the pipeline, um, but not yet.
Okay, so how many franchisees do you have now?
Yeah, so we launched the franchise operation within this last year. So I have 2 corporate locations and 2 franchise locations at the moment, and currently vetting
Okay,
more. Yeah,
okay.
so early on.
And if somebody wanted to become a franchisee of yours, how would they go about doing that? How would they find you?
Yeah, I mean, you could go to madethisfranchise.com. Mentioned he came from Josh's show, and we would do a vetting process and figure out if this is a good fit for both sides. It has to be a core value match, is what we're talking about. We have to make sure that this is the right type of model for you. So it's usually a 1 to 3 month process to actually get there.
Cool. So when you guys were putting the franchise together, can I ask you how much you had to spend on this? Because this is something that people who are thinking about franchising need to know. It's expensive.
Mm-hmm. I will say, and I hope I could save people a lot of money just with this tip over here. I spent a lot of money because I hired consultants when I did not need to. I probably spent over 100 grand. And I'd probably say, hey, maybe that's what you should budget. Think about spending $100,000, and I'll give you the cost breakdown. If you want to, the first thing you need is the FDD, which is the legal document. From any reputable franchise attorney, it's going to cost between $20,000 to $25,000 for that document. After that, you probably need to systemize your operations because they're not done yet. This is kind of what I'd say is you got to do this anyways. But think about documenting everything, putting it into place. Hiring people could help you do that. Making videos, 10 grand, right? Roughly. Then you think about, okay, you need to create training modules. When someone signs your franchise agreement, they want to get going. You need to create training modules for this. Then you have to think about, hey, you have to license in certain states, some of which costs money, then ongoing fees. It adds up. And that's even besides, that's not even keeping into account like any consultants you have to hire. So I'd probably say budget $100,000 to get going if that's what you want to do.
And when somebody signs a franchise agreement with you, can I ask you what your fee is?
Sure. We charge currently $35,000 for the initial buy-in, and the
Okay.
royalty 6% of revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you only need 4 or 5 franchises before you covered your costs.
Correct. Yeah. A large chunk of I pretty much put all that money back into marketing again for new franchisees, but if I wasn't, then that would be you'd be able to cover it. And the reality is like you could eventually, even if you have one location, over time you should be able to cover it if that location is doing well, you're collecting your royalty on that location. Of course, the goal is to get more locations, right? But yeah, you could absolutely cover your cost.
Well, that's cool. So, Neil, unfortunately, we are out of time. And you
It's a
already
fun
told
time.
us once how people can find you. And if you're watching this on Facebook, it's www.madethis.com.
Hmm.
Is there someplace else people could go to find you to have a conversation?
Of course, you can go to my website, neelparekh.com. Contact me there. Anyone who messages me, I'll respond to you directly, offer whatever assistance I can. And yeah, for anyone listening, I'm actively on the hunt for our next franchisee. So if you or someone else might be a fit, would definitely appreciate your help here.
And just to let you know, this is a really cool idea. I mean, this is something which I've talked to a lot of franchise people. I've talked to them, about different ideas. And this one is an unusual idea, which if you're in the cleaning business or you're thinking about being in the cleaning business or you run a vending company like I used to, this could be a good side thing for you to do. Give Neil a call and see what you think. And Neil, thanks so much for being with us. And I've got 2 things I would like you to do. The first one you've heard me ask about 360 times now, because this is close to where we are for
Hmm.
podcast episodes. And that's going to wherever you are listening to this podcast. And please, 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 please leave us an honest rating and review. If you love us, you can give us 5 stars. If you hate us, you'll give me 1 star and you have to watch me cry for a little bit. I'll get over it. And the second is I have my second book came out a couple of months ago, and it's a whole lot of fun. It's a continuation of my first book, The Sustainable Business. This is what it takes to create a sale-ready company. And our friend John Aardvark has tons of new challenges to face. And you'll have a great time reading this. Even people who have read the book who have nothing to do with being business owners tell me I can't wait for the third book to find out what happens. I'm not telling you, but I do know. So if you want to get a copy of the book, I happen to be selling it for half price. You can have a free 20-minute conversation with me if you're so inclined, if you buy it off our site. And to get it is www.salereadycompany.com. That's www.salereadycompany.com. And this is Josh Patrick. We're with Neel Parekh. You are at Cracking the Cashflow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.